will call this meeting of the Lathrup Village Planning Commission for Tuesday, September 20th, 2022 to order. Madam Clerk, we could have a roll call.
Roll call, Chairman Hammond,
Here.
Vice Chair Stansberry,
Here.
Commissioner Fobbs,
Here.
Commissioner Cantor.
Here. Commissioner
Tamarelli.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. It's not on the agenda, but we will do Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, at this point, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda or make modifications to the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second. So moved and seconded. Roll call, please. Or can we? Let me roll call. Well, here. We'll just do a voice vote.
We
All
were
in-
doing individual votes, roll call votes for Zoom.
Zoom meetings, but we don't have to do that now.
We still do it on council. but-
We do it for council, but
Fair enough. So all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, agenda is approved. Next is approval of the meeting minutes from the planning commission meeting of September 16th. No, that's not right.
oh, sorry.
August 16th.
I thought I did that.
2022.
In a minute, I'm sorry.
Thank you. If anyone has any modifications or would like to make a motion.
6A. It's regarding the generator. It says to set a public hearing on September 20th.
Mhm.
I think that should be September 26th, right? Because that's at the
No,
next.
that
council
would
meeting.
have
It's for the
for
planning
today.
commission.
That would have been for today's planning commission meeting.
Oh, okay.
So we unfortunately were not able to make that deadline for a couple different reasons.
But that's what was discussed at the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Second. So moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next on our agenda is public comment. I don't see any public in the room. Do we have any public on Zoom?
That is a new.
Okay, and we will close the public comment and move on to new business. So the only item of new business is the election of the secretary. So Susie, you want to introduce this or do you want me to? I kind of feel like I got it.
Let's
Can
go for it.
Okay,
Lisa.
so with Chairman Petrowski no longer on, his commission ended and he's no longer on the planning commission. As a result, we were without a chair. As a result of that, based on what's in the city charter, the vice chair is moved into the chair office. The secretary is moved into the vice chair's office. And as a result of those moves, we are left with an open seat for the office of secretary on the planning commission. So our job today is to select from amongst our membership who isn't already in an office, one of us to be the secretary. So we will entertain motions for nominations for secretary.
I'll nominate Bo. For position of secretary, unless you want it, Will,
It's up, if anyone has an affinity for
or
it,
Will, either one.
I'm happy to do it.
I'll be secretary. How about that? Since I guess from 10 years. Wait.
I'll
There it is.
nominate Will.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second to nominate.
Okay, excellent. We have.
You're next, Bo.
So moved and seconded, all in favor of Will Fobbs as secretary, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Will.
Okay. All right.
It's a lot of work.
I know. Unless you got to show me the rough about the breakfast.
I'll talk to you about it.
Right.
Vice secretary, yeah. Next agenda item is old business and tabled items. First is the impervious surface coverage standards and ordinance discussion.
Want to take it away for us and walk us through the minor changes? Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, in your packet, you have the memo that we sent from Giffords Webster. And so We took into consideration some of the comments and items that was discussed at the last meeting, and so that's back before you today to kind of hone in and narrow down some of the details and what you want to commit to moving forward. So we had discussed that, given that the commission's in transition, that at this point, we would just want to keep it at simplicity, for simplicity's sake, and just move forward with potentially determining a percentage that you would want to go with if we were to amend the ordinance, whether that be the 35% that was recommended or 45%, or if you get a chance to look through the similar communities and what they've done, if you have a different percentage in mind. I know that we also talked about doing a scaled percentage, and that would be something to consider. But ultimately, our thought is that we would just keep it at a constant. And if the commission agrees, we can discuss which one or what percentage would be most appropriate for the city. But other than that, there was the comment and the discussion last meeting that had to do with driveways and parking and extending driveways into the public right of way. And so I considered how to best implement that into the memo and to today's discussion. And so I know that it's been a challenge in the community to limit parking, and especially how to address the loop driveways and the semicircle driveways. And so at the end of that memo for the impervious coverage discussion, you'll see that we added in there how a driveway should be defined, or the limitations to a driveway as it relates to impervious coverage. That being a width of 20 feet, the shortest distance from the right of way to the garage. In that way, that would help the city and the commission guide its discussion with impervious coverage, especially as it relates to driveways. And so I suppose that would create an existing nonconformity with a lot of the semicircle driveways if we were to pursue moving forward with that. But that's something that obviously we discuss here and kind of take the temperature with the commission about how to go about something like that. So not a whole lot of change from the last time we spoke, but at this point, if we want to consider something that we can have as a public hearing next time, we'd be happy to shore up all the loose ends and move in that direction. So
Thanks, Eric. The only comments I had, I did via Facebook query some of my neighbors about this issue before our previous meeting. And one of the pieces of feedback I did get was about sliding scale based on lot size. There's a few people that responded to me, just indicated, well, you know, if you've got a very large lot and that, you know, 45% is relatively small, right? But if you have a very small lot, that 45% could be significant in terms of the impact of an impervious surface impacting storm water runoff and things like that. Because there's just less green space for that water to go to off of the impervious surface. So I personally, I think that it's a good idea for us to take into account a sliding scale, but I also recognize, as you noted, you know, it's a more complex calculation. It would take us a little bit of time to figure out, well, what should that scale be? What are the cutoffs or the ranges or whatever? I feel like, you know, we can start by setting a specific number, a maximum number as a percentage, and we can always adjust it in the future. Is setting a precedent, and so we need to be mindful of that. But that's where my thought is. It's taking into account what I've heard from residents that they think some people think a sliding scale would be best just based on different lot sizes, but also we need to take into account not introducing more complexity than we need to. The other thing I was thinking about was exactly what you were just saying, Eric, about the circle driveways. And I know of at least a couple of properties that are on corner lots that had additions put on. The addition is a garage, right? So there was the driveway for the original garage on one corner and a driveway for the new garage on another corner. But I feel like that's not a precedent we want to reinforce, right, and encourage. So given that, I like personally, I like the language for driveways they added to the recommended ordinance language.
Yeah, two things on, just from a discussion standpoint. The first one, I still think I'm a big fan of a sliding scale. I think if we don't actually bake it in, yeah, if we don't bake it in now, it's going to be very difficult to go back and retrofit. Especially once precedent is set with what we're doing. Even if we start saying, well, what's the upward bounds? And we actually say this is actually some type of, we can discuss on a case by case, something that actually even we can push it down the road. But as long as we have some type of upward bound, we're actually giving the precedent that there is an intention for range. Because again, what if I have 3 lots?
Right.
Now what? And I want to actually put a circle drive, right? Or I could actually say, well, I have if I have 3 lots, I might actually make sense to have 2 driveways because I got so much land. And so, but it would actually still satisfy the first one because I have so much land, I have so much variance for an impervious cement, and then maybe that actually makes sense for someone
For
that
that size of a lot. Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? So I think it's in this amendment, number 4 is actually in a weird way connected to the sliding scale. And that way it kind of fits. Because if you have 2 lots and you have a small lot, like in your example, a garage and 2 garages, well, that wouldn't actually fit the scale.
Correct.
So then we actually know how to move. We don't even get to the last one with 2. You see what I'm saying? Like it almost actually eliminates number 4 if we do a sliding scale the right way. Or we actually say that language, but we can obviously change it on a case by case. If someone says this is the reason and this use case makes total
Yeah, we'd
sense.
be recommending the approval of the variance.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that was just my thoughts about it. Like I'm dealing with a project like this, a really big house, and there's some rigmarole with having 2 entrances, but the house is so big it actually makes sense. And so trying to get that to work with the current language has been hard. And so I'm sensitive to that just because it's, I guess, personal from a business standpoint. So that's one thing I saw, Jason.
The question I have is how, whatever we decide, sliding scale, no sliding scale, there's going to be a lot of people who aren't going to fit this currently. And there are houses that are not an addition that still have 2 driveways that were still built in 1950 something. This really, at least to me, started with those additional parking pads.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I guess sometimes it seems like we're getting a little away from what we started the conversation about. But I do agree, if you just focus on the sliding scale, it eliminates dealing with all the specifics of other issues that are going to come up anyway. But the question that you brought up is, how do you determine the sliding scale?
And what you made me think of as well is let's say somebody's got a tiny lot. The concept of legally non-conforming comes into play. So they need to make a change to their garage or something that requires them to be brought up to code on everything. Well, then they can't be brought up to code on that if it's a really small lot.
It's already small. And the other thing is the 20-foot width of the driveway. I've noticed there are some people, what people are doing is you have a driveway and you have grass next to it. So as opposed to putting a parking pad in the street, you just dig up some of your own grass and you make your driveway like twice as wide, which is definitely wider than 20 feet. But it doesn't impact the street. It just impacts the amount of grass that they have. And I wonder if that's going to that would be something that would come up. It would be fixed on a sliding scale also.
Yep.
So I guess the question is, how would we start the process of determining how you put a sliding scale together without just saying 25 to 50.
Right, so something random,
Right.
right,
I
right.
mean, unless,
Gotta be some logic. to
I
it.
mean, that's, I mean, what I'm just saying, you
So
know.
are there examples of sliding scales for this type, for any type of use?
Was it Birmingham or one of them had
Um,
one in here?
Berkeley's got a different one. It's got not really a.
I don't think there's a,
Beverly Hills.
Yeah, Beverly Hills, 25 to 35%,
Yeah.
depending on the. But that's not
based on the district.
right.
That's
based on
different.
the district, yeah.
We want to make a sliding scale that's based on the lot size. So then the trick is, well, what's an appropriate percentage for a very large lot? Well, start off with just figuring out what's the largest lot we have in the city, what's the smallest lot that we have in the city? And then what percentage of each of those would be appropriate? That could at least be a starting point for like what the minimum would be and what the maximum should be.
Right, and I think that that's probably kind of the stickler would just be that if that's the path that the commission chooses to pursue, then we would take that upon ourselves and do the research and continue the discussion once we are able to obtain some more data and understanding what would be an appropriate percentage to start with and to scale from there.
Yeah, so it slows down the process of getting this new language into the ordinance. The question is like, what's the risk of that? Like, do we have we're not expecting a whole bunch of
No.
new
Don't
developments
expect to
or,
Run on,
yeah.
you know, concrete.
So I
Well, we
think,
only have one new development and that's not going anywhere right now. So,
great point.
Yeah.
But this would affect that.
exactly.
It's a pretty big lot.
Exactly.
Might be the biggest lot in the city.
Yeah.
So,
And this just relates to single family lots. So I think part of the question last time was, how does this relate to commercial if at all?
it doesn't.
And it doesn't, yeah. So it's been determined it's just for single family residential.
One of the things that came up was this, how you pronounce, bioretention pond,
Yes.
that it was pretty clear, everybody's not quite happy with a bioretention pond, because they're not all quite consistent.
Mhm.
The more
There's
you-
no standard.
The more you walk around, the more you realize how they're
Right.
not consistent.
Yeah.
So I guess, are we, from a general standpoint, are we leaning to say, if you have a bio retention pond, as long as it's maintained, it stays, but there are no new ones? Is that what we're working towards?
Well, I think the thing was they crossed out.
Yeah, I saw that.
You don't no longer get the bonus if you have, some of these, what do they call, what do you call them? Bioretention area, rain garden.
Yeah,
Rain garden.
Rain
those kind of
garden,
things.
yeah. But the question is are we looking to say this is not really part of the calculation anymore?
Do we have many bioretention ponds or is it just flooding?
I was very polite.
Both.
Cheeky. People have installed rain gardens and
Pseudo bioretention.
things,
Right,
but
right.
How many? How many did rain gardens use?
there was, there was that project, long before.
10? I mean, 100?
It's not 100. It's definitely,
There
Less
are a
than-
significant
I know.
amount though. I
Yeah.
mean,
There are-
and I guess the question is whether or not you're asking rain gardens that were done properly or just rain gardens in general, because that's a big difference. Yeah, but there's a significant number.
I spent a lot of time thinking about this since we last met, and I have a few things. I don't know if I want to say I'm for or against a sliding scale. I think we need to think about some other, I think myself, think we should think about some other things first. Before we pick a sliding scale and rush to put language in that we're gonna maybe not want to do later. Some of the things I've thought about, and mostly just thinking about my house and how it works, and every house is different, but let me just plot on. Front coverage versus rear and backyard. So I
Great.
don't know, it seems, I'm gonna say most homes in Lathrup, the backyard really doesn't drain to the front yard. It just sort of drains down. We know that because there are a lot of people that complain about having flooding backyards. I don't know how many as a percentage. My backyard, none of the water in the backyard goes to the front. So do we need to, and then as part of that backyard thing, some of the notes in the letter talked about pools. Doesn't a pool take in water? How does it give off water?
well, the pool deck is a place
Okay,
that
so the
doesn't,
pool deck, I think we need to clarify that and say pool deck, concrete pool deck area. And maybe not the word deck, because that was the next thing I thought is, I just
Right.
put a deck in a
Right.
couple of years ago. And yeah, it's impervious, but I've got probably 50 slats and the water just goes down in the
Right.
ground. So I don't know that we want to have deck, at least in my mind, as a word we want to.
Maybe impervious surface. So if there's a swimming pool, impervious surface. I mean, that's what we're really looking
The
at.
surface of the bottom of the pool is certainly impervious, but it's really the outside.
Right.
of the- Yeah, okay. So I don't know, maybe we need to clarify.
Well, you actually mentioned something, and I want to make sure. If you look at the different cities and how many are doing sliding scales that we can't find that actually fit our definition, the question is why?
It's hard. So.
It makes sense, but it may actually be a logistic nightmare.
Yeah. How much
Um,
time do you want to spend? And back to the value, if, in my mind, there's two probably reasons why we're doing this, right? Drainage, runoff into the storm sewers, and appearances. So, on a cost benefit basis, how much is it gonna cost us to manage and measure and have our good friends at Giffords Webster run a giant, big data analysis so that we can, is that
it's a good point, is the bang for the buck, yeah.
how much, one of my thoughts here was, how much does 100 cubic feet of runoff cost the city, a resident? Right, how much, I don't think anyone can tell us that. Is that a number that we know? What about downspouts draining down driveways? Like I have a downspout, I drain it down the driveway because I can't, my sidewalk just collapsed. I'm gonna replace it and I'm gonna run the downspout underneath it. But for the time being, because I don't want the sidewalk to drop more, I'm running the water down the driveway, which then gets into the ditch, which is where it's supposed to go. Right? So, what about downspouts? And, can we offer incentives to people with rain barrels, maybe to collect the water, or to not run downspouts down the driveway? How do we incentivize or disincentivize people? That's to me, some of the things we really need to think about. The percentages are great, but it's sort of like an answer searching for question. What are we trying to do? Appearance wise, we have these concrete oceans. Is the percentage in my mind might be better to focus on the front yard. What's the percentage of the front yard? Maybe using as a base, 2 car length wide driveway, which probably isn't 20 feet. I think I measured mine, I think it was 15. Do we need to go a full 20? That seems pretty wide. So that's just another thought I had. 20 may seem a little high. A couple of ideas I've had. I lived in a city in the Chicago area, which is famous for parking fees. And in the city of Chicago, if you want to have your car in the city of Chicago, you have to buy a sticker. And each car that parks overnight in the city of Chicago needs a sticker. So, I'm not big on more taxes. Anybody who knows me knows I'm not saying to do that. But maybe that's the disincentive we have to think about for people that have 7 cars parked on the driveway every night. If I've got to put a sticker in at $100 or $10 or pick a number, I don't know. Every year I got to buy this sticker or I'm going to get a citation. That might help people think, well, okay, and then we can use that money to
Well, let me stop.
better the drainage system.
Go back to the sticker. I'm having trouble seeing the tie between the sticker and
So the
runoff.
sticker is the idea that people have these large driveways because they want.
They want
all
more
these
cars.
on.
Got it. So if somebody had 2 cars and they were both in the garage, they wouldn't need a
Yeah,
sticker.
you don't need it. The incentive is you don't have to buy a sticker.
Right.
Right. But if I get 6 cars and 2 of them are in the garage, I gotta put 4 of them on the driveway overnight.
What? So I don't want to penalize families that wind up having lots of kids.
No, I
They're
know,
teenagers,
but that's
but
what we talk about.
I actually like the concept. If we actually look at the slats that people are actually putting on the road.
Yeah.
That would actually they're either paying for it.
You mean the pads?
Yeah,
The
yeah. You know how they
pads,
put the
the
pads?
pads.
That actually I love that concept for stickers. If we're going to explore stickers, Why? Because now I'm decentivizing using that, or actually someone saying, I want to actually make it even bigger. You know, that actually would help with impervious, because now I'm thinking twice. Or the city saying, you know, the penalty, maybe that stops it. I don't know, but if we're gonna go down that road, I actually like it more so for those pads
So
that folks are putting.
just so I'm understanding, so are you saying like, so say Bruce wants to put a parking pad out in front of his house, that's probably a really bad example, you don't
doesn't
have really
want
good space, Jason. Right, say Jason wants to put a parking pad out front, and we say, all right, you can do that, but it's gonna cost you,
X.
it's gonna cost you $300 for a sticker that says that you're allowed to park there. And that's what we do. I think that's a pretty strong disincentive.
Wait,
Is,
I-
but
Well-
is that?
or is
that's
it making
the-
it worse?
And then I guess
Or,
you
or,
have to say, if you buy a sticker, then the standards, then you will have to create, right? You'll have to then get a permit, like an extra cement permit, so you can pour your extra
Well,
parking pad.
so
But-
we've gone pretty far
It's
down this
pretty
path. I
far.
do want to call out the fact that something like a license to park
Yeah.
is not part of our zoning ordinance.
Yeah, well, I-
Well,
No,
but so one thing, I mean, what this is making me think about is, you know, from the infrastructure committee, we had. I always feel like I'm excluding you.
no,
because
you're
people are
fine,
that
you're
way.
fine.
But that's why I called on Bo, because he was the first person I saw that wasn't me.
We do
the
this, I know,
secretary.
I know, I gotta start moving.
No, but in the infrastructure committee, and I may have mentioned this before to us, but we had a presentation from a group that helps cities set up essentially a tax structure based on the amount of impervious surfaces on a given lot, which has been, you know, which is actually a legal way of, you know, it's legal to do that and then charge the residents a tax based on their impervious service, with the thought being, you know, we have to pay for the upgrade or the maintenance and upgrade of the storm sewer system. And this is a way that the residents would contribute towards that. And there's about, I think they say, don't quote me on this, it's been 2 or 3 years since they did the presentation, but I think there were about 80 cities in the state that are currently doing that. Might be more, but so it's kind of a similar discussion.
I
And
see
it
as
might
a
be,
disincentive for the 5% or 8%, whatever, versus the 90% that are just have a straight driveway to the right of way. Why should I have to pay an extra tax? I'm already paying that in my water through the sewage.
Right.
But use it as a way for these people that have chosen to have this additional, and I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, you're just,
I want to be careful. I'm not saying let's put, everybody has to pay more
Right.
money because.
But the question, and I'll use my own house. My driveway is 100 feet long, but my lot it supports it. Because I remember when I had to repay the driveway, it was 100 feet. It's 100 by, I think, like 30 or something. The 2 cars are in the garage. So why would I have to do anything? Just the fact that I got a bigger driveway than you? It wouldn't be fair to me. That goes back to my sliding scale. I'm not saying I don't understand, but
If your cars are parked in the garage.
it doesn't matter. It's my driveway. So if my sister, my brother, my cousins want to park their car in my driveway, it's
Overnight, they
it's-
get out
but it-
overnight.
no, but it's my driveway.
We're
And there's
actually,
a bunch of other residents that are gonna say, it's my driveway. I'm paying taxes for my house. I'm maintaining my driveway. You can't tell me how many cars I can put in my driveway and then tax me for it because I just happen to have 12 cars and you don't. That's not fair. I think that we have to get back to, this started based on the fact that we're trying to eliminate all these paths in the street.
that's why I brought it up. That's like-
No, we are all
Okay, it wasn't about the fact that people's backyards are flooding. I know people's backyards are flooding and there's a way to fix that, but you have to do, that's a resident, that's your own issue. And you can call on somebody and they can come out and fix the drainage in your backyard and have a drain, just like we did. But my neighbor has a pad in front of his house. It's been there for 40 years, I think. And he's very proud of it because his father-in-law put it there. His complaint is that everybody else parks in it.
Mm.
But now you're saying, there's a sticker. So how does he police the people who are parked in front of his house?
He shouldn't have.
He
He
shouldn't
shouldn't
have that issue. The point is that I'd like to be able to say, we need to get rid of the pad. Because the pads are what creating the problem.
Right.
And I
Well,
think if we
I
focus
agree.
on that, the problem is there's too much impervious surface that's affecting the streets. That's not going to the ditches.
So you say it's not about impervious surfaces in backyards, it's not about impervious surfaces.
It's not
in
about
side
his, it's
yards,
not about his
not his
pool in the
driveway.
backyard. No, it's about the fact that there's a pad. It's about the fact that the people down the street from me decided to put rocks down to put an additional pad and then realized they probably couldn't. So now they just got rocks and another pad. It's that kind of stuff that's affecting the impervious surfaces. I don't think it's, no offense, but you know, I mean, but I think
I'm not, I'm just putting it out there as something.
I think we need to kind of get back to, we started with the paths and the fact that the paths are creating a problem. And another part that came up with the infrastructure was the ditches and culverts are having problems draining because we have foliage in there.
There's a lot of reasons. It's
Well, I mean,
foliage.
Right, I mean, there's, yeah,
It
I could talk for 10 minutes on the reasons.
But I mean, we were talking about bioretention
Right,
ponds, okay,
yeah.
so I'm just using foliage.
Right.
Those are some of the things that are causing some of the bigger issues. And they're simple, but they're not. And how do you address it? And the biggest concern is, how are you going to deal with the people who already have it?
Yeah.
We can create a zoning
I agree.
ordinance that says going forward, we only want you to have between 25 and 45. That's fine, depending on your lot size, but it's not going to change the fact that you have all of this other stuff already happening. So there needs to be some either incentive or disincentive to get people to resolve some of the issues to make it better.
Or even grade the pads if it's are existing.
Yeah.
So it's at least at a certain angle, so it's not going towards the street. It's actually going back towards the ditch, because to your point, it's been there for 50+
Yeah.
years. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't, I would love if they got rid of it,
Yeah.
but there's a cost to that.
There was a
And-
cost to put it in.
Mhm.
Can I make a
Well, if it go-
recommendation?
Yes.
Since we are, as you rightly pointed out, our planning commission's not in charge of necessarily that. So perhaps what planning commission needs to do is make a recommendation to city council and specified infrastructure study group as the body that researches and brainstorms some additional solutions for the parking pads to deal specifically with this issue, right?
Hmm.
Their whole mandate was to deal with infrastructure. How are we gonna manage it? How are we gonna fix it? How are we gonna move forward? So maybe that's the recommendation the planning commission makes. I mean,
I'm not sure, but I personally agree that the whole problem, we should just throw it to the city council and the infrastructure committee that they've impaneled. I think that things like thinking about having things specified in the ordinance that would control percentages, like as a general rule.
Yes.
That's us, and we should probably do that. I'm curious about this idea about should we differentiate what is allowed in front yards versus backyards, if the problem we're really trying to solve is something like parking pads and the impact that they have on stormwater removal or drainage.
Yeah.
But then there's also things like we've talked about a couple different ideas that clearly don't fall into the planning commission's purview. Things like licensing,
Yep.
things like taxes, like those are not, that's not us.
Yep.
Right. So I think we can make a recommendation that the city council ask the infrastructure study group to look into alternatives to try and resolve this. We have to be pretty specific about what it is we're asking them to try and solve the problem of and research and investigate. But I still think that we should do something about changing the language around impervious surfaces in the city, just so that it's clearer. What
Yes,
it's
the
allowed.
the question I have though is just, as we get into this discussion is, if our ditch system worked, would this even be an issue? Right, because
Yeah,
because
mean,
if the rainwater coming off your driveway, ends up in the ditch, we've got more concrete and that water is ending up in the ditch like it's supposed to. If those ditches worked, it would be taking the water away and it wouldn't be flooding.
Okay.
So then parking pads really wouldn't be an issue either, because again, all the water that lands on them would go into the ditch.
Theoretically,
From a seepage drainage.
But on the other side, parking pads would not be something we would want to continue to go forward.
right.
Okay, so it would be, if you have it, it stays, but going forward, it doesn't exist. If the ditches were working the way they were supposed to. So I guess the first question is.
Do we want to allow parking pads?
I
That's
was
right.
I recommend we split this in half, into two pieces, because we're really talking about very similar items that are, but they're distinctly.
They're related,
different.
but they're distinct, yeah.
And I would recommend that we actually put this in part A and part B. What are we doing for surface as a whole, and what are we doing for parking pads? And then that'll allow us, if we need to table one or the other or both, we can do such, or we can vote on both, and then it's cleaner.
It makes sense.
Do we want to ask Giffords Webster to put together proposed zoning ordinance language is around parking pads? And what would the language be?
Would it-
People have done parking pad.
Is it allowed? Is it not
Right
allowed?
now, all they have to do is pull a permit, right?
They should be, people should. be-
Theoretically.
People should be pulling permits to, if they intend to pave little parking pad
Part of the right of way.
in the right of way.
But right now, there's nothing that says,
But
if I,
there is
if I
nothing.
show up and say I want to pull a permit because I want to take out some grass and put in a parking pad, there's nothing that says, well, you can't do that anyway.
No.
And then if I say,
No standards.
if I
There's
say my
nothing saying
neighbor's
4
got
inches,
one,
6 inches of
that's been
concrete,
grandfathered in.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that stops me from asking.
And I can do the whole length of width of my lot. I want to do one car length. You can do whatever right now, right?
Mhm. Yeah, there's
That's
the ordinance is completely silent on the extra parking.
So I could
Right,
just
so
pave
maybe
my
that's
whole
where we
front
need to
yard.
focus.
Yes, there it is.
Not if you,
Not
not if you
even
have.
with impervious surfaces, but
Literally, I could
Yeah,
pave my whole
right
front
now.
yard.
right
You
now.
can pay the right of way part.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
If your lot was big enough and like you could, pave the whole thing.
Hmm.
In theory, you thinking about it?
No, I'm just shocked.
There's,
It's just, that's why we're having this discussion.
yes.
yeah,
So that's the,
that's why I got passionate a couple months ago about all of this, right?
That-
Like,
that-
there's
that-
nothing. There's
that
no
needs to get
standards, There's
nothing.
They
Yeah,
gotta
the-
pull an extra cement permit. And that, I mean, typically those are for, your approach, right? Your approach to your sidewalk. And you wanna pave in front of your,
So there's no standard now to put in a parking pad, 3 inches, 6 inches, culvert, nothing. Yeah, we need.
there wouldn't be a culvert under the parking pad anyways, because those only go, through the
Well,
ditch.
some of them, we've got one example.
Is there a reason why we
Oh.
wouldn't put a culvert under a parking?
Well, we've had an instance just recently where somebody put a parking pad without a culvert
I mean, it should
over the
have.
ditch.
Yeah,
But there's
It
no,
should,
but there's no
should.
ordinance requiring
Yeah,
it.
no, so I mean, that's.
There's nothing that requires.
That's.
But the goal is
So
not to be able to do it
so
anyway.
then it's not an issue.
Zero, yeah.
That's the goal. I'm not saying that's what I would see. The goal is to say, if it's something there currently, it has to be maintained, but going forward, this is not something we want to continue.
Well, that one's being a simple solution. We could talk about those that are grandfathered in.
Yeah.
That can be addressed. But if we're agreeing here that we don't want parking pads, technically from a standard, we can actually say there's no more parking pads. Or we're adding that to the language. We can talk about what we can do, retroactively or.
Well,
instead of-
they would just all be legally non-conforming.
Right,
You really can't do anything.
right.
retroactive.
So it's like,
What we're talking about is creating language that would potentially prevent
them more.
any
More.
more being created. If that's what we want to do, I guess I have a question. Is that the intent of the planning commission to just not have these parking pads in the right of way or parking pads off to the side of driveways, or like, do we
Well, that's
really?
something we need to discuss, right?
Right.
Because That's what we do.
It-
That's
it-
what we
yeah,
set the
it-
zoning standard, so.
well, all right, so here's the question that I've been kind of mulling over, and Eric just said it too. So is this really a zoning issue, or is this a general code issue?
There is,
Because the general code deals with the streets, sidewalks and public space.
And right away and all that stuff.
Chapters actually called. So, I mean, so I think if it's a general code issue, then we just need to take this. Get
So
again to
the
council.
last paragraph of the memo that we got for today's packet says the commission expressed concern, was a review from last meeting. Commission expressed concern regarding extending residential driveways into the right of way. However, regulations pertaining to improvements in the right of way are found in the municipal code, not in the zoning ordinance. So is it in the municipal code where we would say parking pads aren't allowed in the right of way, but in the zoning ordinance where we would say parking pads aren't allowed elsewhere on a property? Or are we only really concerned about parking pads that would be adjacent to the right of way?
Where else would it be?
be
Let's say
Next to the
could be
driveway.
next to the
like
driveway
that,
where you
next
want to
the
put like a
driveway.
trailer or something like
Okay.
that.
Right.
Okay. Oh, no, I just, okay.
And another example, potentially would be that if you did have a standard driveway, whether it's 20 feet wide or 15, 10 feet wide, 12 feet wide. And you had standards for impervious coverages, and the lot in question is still meeting the impervious coverage limitations, the maximums. And if they wanted to do a parking pad would be additional coverage, but if we do the calculation and analysis and it still turns out to be less than 35 or 30%, you may be able to permit an on-site or on private property parking pad. But if the property is already, at its limit, and by proposing a parking pad takes it over, once you do the analysis, then that would be a variance. Or it have to be addressed a different way.
Right.
Like that.
So again, is the intent to
I was just-
not allow parking pads adjacent to the right of way?
Yeah, for me, it's just right away, because again, if I had the from within my threshold, I have a camper, I don't want to tear up my grass and keep replanting it. It's not seen from the street. I did something crazy. I put some trees, or it goes around, whatever it is, or I have a basketball half, something I'm doing with cement. And I'm within my threshold and it fits. Great.
Why not? Yeah.
Why not?
That's fine.
That's a pad and I'm playing pickleball. Great.
Have you got
If
the
it
space?
fits
And
and
it
it
fits.
works, then I'm playing pickleball in my backyard.
Right, but we're saying on private property, not the right of way.
That's right.
the key.
That's right. So I think that it's actually just the right of way that is actually
The issue with the right of
the
way.
concern. And then I think that gets to the front yard issue that we're kind of dealing with, front versus back, at least for now. At least we're addressing part of it, not the whole thing.
Can you answer the question of what else is the problem that would fall under this in the ditch? Just so I can make sure I'm following.
Well, you mean with
With the ditch
ditching
system, in the system.
So there's a lot of issues, one, as you said, is the rain gardens that people put in that weren't put in so that they absorb water. Instead, they're just blocking it, so they keep the water from flowing. We've got a lot of instances of raised culverts, so the culverts heave over time, and they come up, you see them coming up through the driveways, and so that prevents the water from flowing until it gets very high. We've started addressing those, so with the road projects the last 2 years, those approaches that have heaved culverts were required to fix them, but that's a very small subset of the overall city. And one of the things that I brought up several times in council meetings is that, the initial recommendation that kicked off the whole, millage and road project, called for code enforcement to, take a stringent approach and address the non-7 miles. So the other 19 miles of streets, 38 miles if you look at both sides of the street. And, address the simple fixes of the ditches. So like, hey, there's a culvert that needs to be replaced. The other issue that you see a lot are, people have filled them in partially, or they no longer have the grade. So typically they run from one end of the street to the other, and there's a slight grade, so the water goes down to the catch basin at the end. But, either over time or, through a lack of maintenance or filling it in, instead of, given house, instead of being like this, is now like this. So the water doesn't flow. So that's part of what they're doing with some of the simple fixes to the ditches is with the road project, is that they're regrading them. The other issue that just popped in and out of my head was culverts.
Degradation of the road base? Is that part of what you think?
No, not so much that. There's one other one. It'll come to me, but
The firm that was, when we brought them in to, when we determined which roads and they looked it up, would they be able to identify the addresses or the properties that have issues so that could assist code enforcement, as opposed to, since we only have one person,
right, well,
as opposed to them driving around, at least this way.
I would say it's not so much of a lack of a resource as much as focusing that resource on that issue.
Okay,
Because, it'd be easy to just walk down, and I guess to step it back a little bit, one of the things like when Rami was here and we talked about this last time, we were talking about, okay, well, how do we train him to identify, what are some of these simple, they just pop back in my head. The other thing along the lines of simple fixes is, I constantly use my neighbor across the street as a great example. The water flows from one end of the street to his. He's the last house before Southfield Road, before the catch basin. And he's got a tree with a root that's blocking the entire
Oh, geez.
ditch. And so again, that's somewhat of a simple fix. You either take that root out, take the tree out, drill through it, whatever, make a pathway for the water. And there's a lot of that too.
okay.
So there's a lot of things, but again, code enforcement would have to be, officer would have to be trained somewhat to identify those situations. To.
Well, that's why I was asking, because there was, and I'm sure a lot of residents said the same thing. Someone came through and identified which squares needed to be replaced in the sidewalk.
Right.
Not that we all agreed, but someone came through. Okay. So if there's a company that came through and identified the sidewalk, there's gotta be somebody that could come through and identify all the culvert issues, which makes it a lot easier for the one person to be able to go out and they don't have to have a whole lot of knowledge about it. They have a list that just says, here's all the addresses that have issues. So as you are working through your regular schedule of things you're working on, you can swing by these addresses and let them know that these are the issues. And then that way it can still get addressed without saying you have to train them and focus them on it.
Yeah, I mean, we could always have the city engineer
I'm
do
just-
that,
I'm
right?
just- I'm
It's
just-
just a matter of who we.
I don't
get
know
to
who
do
the
it,
person
but-
would be. I'm just,
Right.
if somebody, that way somebody can help someone could help the young lady by giving her the list.
Right.
Because obviously she's not gonna be walking up and down the street.
Right,
to,
well, not
uh,
right now, but.
But
but our-
Code enforcement for.
Right, the next
I mean,
code enforcement we hire, I mean, and that was one of the things that, Scott McKee and I have talked about who code enforcement was reporting to, is we need to have somebody in this position who is going to go out there and walk.
Yeah.
And, not be hesitant to go out there and walk because it's winter or it's cold, it's, hot out or whatever, because it's part of the job of doing it effectively, is not just driving by and not getting out of the
Looking from
car.
a distance and
Looking from a
not
distance.
talking to people and.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Unless they do, so when we go out to do, like, I think it'll probably, whether we do it the fall or this spring, I'm not quite sure what we're gonna do yet, but so. Before year 3 of the paving begins, the engineers will go back out there and they are gonna say, and they're gonna look at all the roads that are getting redone. Next year, and they're gonna say, that culvert's bad, that one's bad, that one's bad, right? So they'll be IDing those
Yeah, and next year.
problem areas
mile?
along those paved.
Now, are
streets,
those-
the
are the-
outside.
Are those identified that'll be fixed by when they do the street?
Yeah.
Or those are, no,
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the ones
You're
that need to be
talking about
Right, no,
identified.
I get
Yeah,
it, and that's what I was saying.
So they could do the same thing while they're out. They could, even though it's not gonna get done by the street, they can still say, you got those 20 over there that need to get done too.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because we've used code enforcement, the code enforcement stick to make people repair these on the streets that are getting paved.
Right.
But again, that was something that we put in the recommendation for the non-streets that are
Getting paid.
getting paved as well. It just hasn't happened.
Gotcha.
So I think we need to come back to what are we gonna be asking for relative to this language? Now, I like your
I like
idea,
the A
Will,
and
of
B.
trying to separate it into
Yeah.
two things. So I think the first thing is parking pads. Do we want to restrict them from being allowed in the city? If the answer is yes, And I think what we are asking is for city council to be presented with ordinance language for the municipal code.
In the right of way.
In the right way.
So that restricts the creation of parking pads in the right of way or adjacent to the right of way. But I think that would be in the municipal code, not in the zoning ordinance.
Yes, for right of parking in the right of way, I agree with you.
Okay. So I guess the ask then is come up with some language that can be presented to city council for consideration in the municipal code, restricting parking pads in or adjacent to the right of way. The second bit is impervious surface coverage, which again, we don't have any language around that right now in the zoning ordinance at all. So then,
And I relent to say, as much as I like the sliding scale, not having any, it just seems really horrible because I just don't want to actually do it and then we don't get back to it. And then folks that have multiple lots or larger lots or whatnot are yeah, they're kind of hurt by not being compliant, but whatever it is. And so that's my biggest concern, even though I know sliding scale is going to take a while, or even if we should do it, is it better to actually go high and say, at least we got something that someone can actually, put a basketball
well,
hoop on?
let me pose this question. Should we consider different allowable percentages for front yards versus rear and side yards? Right? No?
I don't think so. Because now you're trying to regulate what you can do where. It's all about my
Lot.
total lot.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, if I got a big enough lot, I might want to put a pad in the front with a fountain on it. If the city allowed the fountain, but don't, just because I have a little bitty backyard, I might want my fountain in the front. Now you're saying, if you
Can't.
separate it, you wouldn't be the,
Well, it's a good point, right? Some people have larger backyards and small front yards, and
Yeah.
other people have small front yards and large
I
backyards.
think it should be the total lot.
Okay.
If anything, I'd say stay with the total lot size.
Okay, that seems more equitable too, I
Yeah.
guess, right? And it's just the nature of the lot that you own.
Yeah.
And how things are already set up on it that impact that. Do other people have different opinions about?
That would be from a visual appearance perspective is really what we're considering,
I think so.
not with regard to seepage and drainage.
And should we be designing zoning ordinances for that just because of appearance? I mean, in some cases it makes sense, right? The zoning ordinances that we have around
Yeah, I
landscaping.
mean, either
things
way,
like
it's a
that.
percentage, right? If you include the whole lot, it's smaller than if you just include the front.
Yeah. Are we in agreement that we should have something?
Yes, we should have
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
Okay, and so I think, and are we in agreement that the something should be based on the entire lot size?
I would say yes.
Yes, okay. So then, again, for simplicity's sake, then are we in agreement that we should just do a maximum for impervious surfaces? And also remember, the language also includes a maximum lot coverage percentage, right? Which is about everything on your lot that isn't impervious surfaces, like your house. Right?
Yeah.
Any outbuildings,
Yeah.
like things like that.
I'm good with just actually doing the flat of 30 now that I'm thinking about it. We've been talking about it for so long. If someone has multiple lots, I would actually hope that they would come before and say, can I, even though it says 30 here, this is not fair because I have 5 lots all next to each other contiguous. And I need another way to get out of my house. Because I have such a big house.
I feel like that's the.
You see what I'm saying, or whatever.
That's the margin case, like. how-
That's what I'm getting at,
It's
is
like
that
one person
wha-
maybe is gonna have that.
that's
problem.
why I'm bringing it up. You're just thinking about the use cases and you're saying, yeah, 30's higher than Southfield, it's higher than quite a few other folks. Maybe there's a number. I think the highest was 35, I think it was, it's Berkeley.
I mean, in our own city, the highest percentage for impervious surface coverage is 53%. And that was one house. Okay, so
1 out of 14,
out of 14 that they looked at,
so it's 7%. If representative of the whole city.
which who knows?
Too small. a
It's
town.
representative of a sample for sure, but yeah.
So I'm good with flat. I know especially if we revisit it or at least consider revisiting it if it makes sense, but right now it's better to have some coverage and see than to have nothing and try to wait and try to.
So if you fall into non-conforming now. And as a new member, I'm gonna ask this because I don't know, and maybe we'll talk about later now. Is there like a list? I mean, do we know? So we can track that going forward? How is that managed?
Well, theoretically, they all pulled permits, and so we have that on record, but.
But if your house was built in 1950 something
Right.
and no longer conforms with the ordinance that we created after the fact,
Right.
Nothing
there's
happened.
nothing documented.
Okay.
That's the concept of legally non-conforming.
And there's no policy that the city has to go enforce those
Oh, yeah.
homeowners to go retroactively get themselves into compliance. The next that happens in is if somebody wants to do a project that requires a site plan review.
Got it.
That's the opportunity to
Okay.
take a look and
All right.
remediate that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, well, so the proposed language for the impervious surface ordinance language includes a lot coverage maximum of 30%. Again, that's any
Buildings.
structure, that's buildings, outbuildings,
Oh,
not the impervious surfaces. And then an impervious surface coverage number of a maximum of 45%. So it's whatever's left on your lot. Well, it's the total lot, 45%, but well, obviously you would only be putting the impervious surfaces in places where there aren't other things covering the lot. Between the two of them, it's 75% of your property is covered by something, either an impervious surface or a building. Personally, I feel like as maximums, that's probably reasonable.
that's a lot.
And again, that was done on that survey that we initially did, kind of a,
Comparing the 14 houses.
yeah, the 14 houses with some having the circle driveway, some without, just kind of trying to gather an idea of what would be an average for the whole community. And so that's where those numbers come from.
Actually, just to correction is, I don't think it's 75%. Because the buildings are included in impervious services, so.
They are?
Yeah,
I thought they weren't.
it says up here in the definition, it says impervious services, all drive. Parking areas, building coverage, patios, decks.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, so
okay,
it's
the building
45%
coverage
of the
language.
lot.
Okay, got
Yeah,
it,
so it's not 75.
got it, okay, thank you for correcting me
Yeah.
on that. So it's 45% total, which would include the lot coverage and additional impervious surfaces like driveways, and sidewalks.
Not bad. At least we'll have something.
So yeah, we'll compile some information, and at this point in time, it sounds like we just want to discuss more of our findings for the next commission.
I feel like the ask is twofold. One is, please like approach city council about adding to the municipal code, restricting the creation of parking pads in or adjacent to the right of way. And for the language for the amendment to add language in the zoning ordinance for impervious surfaces, I think what we have here is actually good. Although I would like us to have a conversation about the definition of impervious surfaces. But I mean, we've kind of come full circle.
I
It seems
know.
like what's actually
I
in
know.
there is acceptable as a starting point. And by a starting point, I mean something that we would codify, and then let's see who comes before us that, has issues with it.
Understand?
So, yeah,
No, go ahead, no, go ahead.
no, I was gonna go back to the definitions.
I was gonna ask, are we continuing to maintain these bioretention areas?
That, we are
Or-
not,
Or is that gonna be B?
I-
From the A to B, are we dividing it up, or because we kind of almost to the point clarified this, once we get the definition right. But so far, it still includes these bioretention.
No, it
areas.
doesn't.
it does not.
So we're taking that out
Yeah,
completely.
number 3, and then page 10, number 3, they crossed that out, we crossed that out.
Yeah, I think the section that you're looking at in the agenda that talks about the bioretention areas and things like that is just options for regulating impervious surfaces.
Okay.
It's like things
It's
that
like-
we should consider.
But
It's
we're,
not in the language.
we're saying, are we, I guess, I'm trying not to say it this way, but are we saying we're not gonna do them anymore?
Well, we're not prohibiting them, we're just saying,
But there's my question.
right. That's why I said that, because I knew that was your question. we're saying for the purposes of this ordinance, we're not giving people credit for putting in retention types of devices.
Right.
But then whether or not to allow rain gardens is a whole nother issue, and that again probably falls back to municipal code, because it's in the right of way.
Does the rain garden have to be in the right of way? Why can't I put it in my front yard?
Well, you could.
If we're preventing gravel pads, which arguably absorb water just as well, or can be as well as any other surface. You know, do we want anything in that? If we're a ditch city and we want to keep the ditches clear and putting in rain gardens of 16 different styles that last one to however many years, we would want to even allow that. You want to put a rain garden in your front yard, go ahead, but not in the.
Yeah,
Right away.
I mean, for my armchair engineering degree, I agree with you
Yeah.
100%. We shouldn't have them.
I mean, it sounds to me like we got a bunch that are probably, I don't know. And I don't know how many that are like, hey, thumbs up, they work great.
It depends on the nature of how it was installed in the first
Oh,
place.
I
and how
know.
it's
I
maintained,
mean,
right?
we
You
need to
can't-
get into regulating that and looking at it. and We're not against them.
I mean, my question is like with the pad. If you have it, you have it.
Right.
But are we saying we would like to recommend no more?
Yes.
Like that's my question.
That's
Yeah,
what I feel.
But again, that would be a
But that's-
municipal code for council.
But
correct?
that, well, I'm trying to add that to whatever we're gonna ask.
Yeah. The question is, does the planning commission think that that is something that the city council should regulate?
Take up the no parking pads and no more rain, no bioretention, whatever you call them. Within the
rain
right of way, in the right of way, in the right of way. It doesn't affect the past, but it would definitely help the future. That's my.
Right, and we've, the last 2 years of construction, we've run into these issues constantly, because, you have to tear up somebody's rain garden when you're grading the ditch, and then they expect it to be put back in, and
It's not gonna be.
and then we have issues with parking pads where, you have to rip out the street, so the parking pad gets damaged, and, we're not gonna pay as residents to cover the cost of their parking pad.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so that's part of the ask too then. Please take that to city
Yeah, I
council,
agree.
some language around restricting rain
Perfect.
gardens in the right way. And bioretention.
just as a similar issue, did we ever decide if we're bringing these two things up, did we ever come up with anything for stamped concrete in the approaches? Because
Generally from a policy standpoint, we have said, no decorative anything.
Yeah.
Not adjacent to the right of way, right? Because some people have, or adjacent to the
right,
the
because we,
approaches,
the
some
same
people
issue.
have like, they've got brick pavers that line it, or they've done some stamps. I mean, it looks nice, don't get me wrong, but like during construction, we've
Right.
said. If that's what you have, it looks beautiful, but it will not be returned in that way, and we are going to just. Return it to concrete
Right.
or asphalt if that's what your approach is, but we will not be, we're not doing anything with it.
Right, but I'm just, what made me think of it is we're really talking about things that affect the right of way here, so that might be something that we should include in that
Yeah.
discussion.
The
Or
discussion
I
is,
would say decorative paving treatment.
Right.
That for next that word.
That was pretty good.
cause I didn't think you actually meant stamped concrete. You just meant like pavement.
But people do stamp concrete.
But stamped concrete is still concrete like any other.
Right, but the issue is okay, so when we put in a new road, we've got to take out the first.
Oh, you're talking about the part,
The front.
okay,
And then
decorative
those
part.
people get.
I got you.
off
Nope,
because-
nope, I got it now.
Yeah, it's not stamped concrete above the right of way.
No,
Oh,
I
yeah.
know, but I understand now, when you take, well, I guess because I've walked by enough of them now, when you take them out, you're just putting back in an approach, not the, no, I've seen the pavers sitting on the grass, not back where they were before.
Right.
Yeah, so if we could get, if council could do that, that'd be great, 'cause that's three, I don't want to say major, but 3 issues that we run across constantly that could be resolved.
Yeah.
There we
With one ordinance update.
Okey-doke.
So the last thing I want to talk about
The
on this is the definitions. So the recommended language for the definitions for impervious surfaces is a surface that has been compacted or covered with a layer of material so that it is highly resistant to infiltration by water. Impervious surfaces include all drives, parking areas, building coverage, patios, decks, pools, pool decks, sport courts, gravelled surfaces, and any other surface which do not readily absorb water. So Bo brought up a good point earlier. Decks are not things that don't readily absorb water. They don't absorb water, but they also allow water to pass through.
Unless there's a concrete.
Unless there's
patio
concrete
underneath.
under it.
But then that falls into the definition.
Yeah.
But yeah, it seems like decks and pools should be taken out of there.
I,
Pool decks still leave in there.
pool decks need to stay in there. Sport courts certainly need to stay in there. Patios need to stay in there. Gravelled surfaces, I guess.
I guess the question, Jason, would, if you say a surface that has been compacted or covered with a layer of material so that it is highly resistant to infiltration by water,
Mhm.
period.
Yeah,
Just leave it at
The
that.
first
I
question,
wouldn't put
all
that
you have to do is say, I'm putting in an X, and then the answer, the question is it highly resistant to infiltration by water? If the answer to the question is
I like that better than
yes,
less.
then you know it fits. If the answer is no,
So you're saying we don't need to specify what impervious
I
surfaces?
wouldn't, because you could have a sports court that's actually lets water through,
Right.
that I
Right.
think you should.
or a
just-
deck, or a pad, or
period.
pool deck.
Well, but
anything.
I think it's helpful to people reading the ordinance
To
to
know,
Well, you can
have
say
examples.
such as, but the
impervious
definition,
surfaces might include.
Right.
but you,
Dry
those are
ways,
just
parking
examples.
areas.
yes,
But the definition is the period after water.
Yeah.
That's just my suggestion.
I agree with that, absolutely.
And
Uh,
as someone that just put in a bocce ball court, which is a sport court, at the Wills,
Mhm.
it definitely absorbs water, so. That's a good way to do it. I mean, it does have a layer of material that is resistant, but the water does
Does
drain
go through.
down.
James,
so-
okay, good.
And underneath it, it just goes into the dirt, so
Right.
maybe can we, on some of these, like sport court, can you say pave?
Well,
that-
No, I don't think we need
Well,
to
no,
get that.
no,
We don't even do that. I think that what we're saying is the sentence after the first sentence, the
No,
first
I know you will say such as,
Right.
but
examples would include, and you could say, yeah, paved sport courts.
I don't know.
Or-
Tennis, how about tennis, court,
What about a basketball court?
basketball court?
What about a bocce ball court that
Well-
is concrete instead of?
Yeah, yeah, you're a fool.
They're
Yeah, no, yeah, maybe not.
Right.
Just leave it sport court. then.
Because they're just
just
examples.
examples, right?
just
And then it's
examples.
like on a case, you know,
And it's still gonna go back to the first question. Does it or does it not let the
Right,
water go through?
that's right.
Exactly.
So is that helpful in terms of the update?
Yeah,
Is there a reason why we should include a definition of what impervious surfaces are?
Well, you
Like
did,
explicit.
examples. Well, I guess I would go back to, you know, the scenario where you have a lot that's close to their maximized impervious coverage or their lot coverage, and they're proposing a sport court. And the sport court, you know, no matter the surface that's being used, is going to take them over their coverage percentage, the 30%, 35%. But then the argument is that, well, it's impervious, or it's permeable, the surface is permeable. So then the question would be, is something like that allowed?
Yeah, because it's
Yeah,
not
because it's
impervious.
not
Be exempt
impervious.
from-
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
and that's kind of, I think.
Yeah, if it
we wanna
is
careful
a surface that is not highly resistant to infiltration by water,
Mhm.
then by definition, by this definition, it's not an impervious surface and it
Right.
would not be applied to the
Okay.
percentage.
Mhm.
Which is great, because now we're encouraging, you know, usage and creative
Oh,
ways to do a
oh,
basketball court, or creative ways to do X, Y, Z or their
Yeah.
deck.
Yep.
Which is a good long-term goal.
Okay,
So, do you want those eliminated or just to say may include?
so the definition should be a surface that has been compacted or covered with a layer of material so that it is highly resistant to infiltration by water, period.
Period.
Examples of impervious surfaces may include,
May.
Yeah, may.
and then you can include everything that you already had in there. Including any other surface which
does
do not readily absorb water.
Sure. Although take decks and.
No, it's just an example.
Yeah, yeah.
They're examples,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
depending on how the
Right,
deck's
right,
done.
yep, 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 yep.
Depending on how, well, the pool is done, like, if the pool's empty, then it actually is an impervious surface, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I don't know.
if it's full, it's an impervious
It's
surface
just,
too.
just sucking up water, just at some point, something's gonna happen.
Something's gonna happen. That's right, okay. And I think the definition for lot coverage is good the way it is. It reads the part or percentage of the lot occupied by buildings, including accessory buildings and swimming pools. And that's fine. Great. So I think then the ask is update the proposed language based on the suggestions we just provided, and then we'll review it at the next meeting. Again,
Do you
Perfect.
want to review it, or do you want to set a public hearing? For October, for Impervious Surfaces? Because we could do both. I mean, they're relatively
Minor changes.
minor
changes.
changes
Yeah.
to the ordinance.
Sure.
and So we
Do
could
both.
set the public hearing for October 18th.
Yeah.
For this with the minor modifications. That-
Yes, let's please set the public hearing for this ordinance language. I think that's it for this topic. Does anybody have anything else they want to add?
Oh, we need a motion and
We need a motion for the public hearing.
Yeah.
We need a motion for, we don't need a motion for the language yet, right?
No, just a
Yeah,
motion to set the public hearing.
On October
with
8th.
the-
don't we make a motion to approve it with the changes?
Yeah. so
Yeah,
that-
and then make a motion for the public hearing.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so we'll entertain a motion.
Second.
No. somebody has to make it.
Bruce
Oh,
is here.
did you say you're making a
I-
motion?
I-
Bruce is gearing up for
I'll
one.
make the motion
Oh.
to, amend section 2.2 definitions as stated earlier in the meeting to, and put a period after the word water and then put examples such as, and some of the examples. And then to amend section 3.12D to add the new standard, as written, right? Yeah.
Yeah, as written.
As written.
on Page 10,
Mhm.
Did you want to include lot coverage in the definition as well?
and,
That's unchanged.
yeah, that didn't change.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
so. it's-
He just said amend
Yeah.
definition.
So that's my motion.
Second.
So moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
All right, then I'll make a motion to set a public hearing for October 18th.
Mhm.
For the impervious. Ordinances, surfaces ordinance.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, public hearing set.
And just so we're clear, we're not including section 5 amended article.
That is in there. Is it, so it's the language as written with the suggestions. that-
Both 3.1.2 and article 5.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. That wasn't.
I think it wasn't mentioned because it's already written.
Okay.
And what
All
was
right.
written. Yeah. Okay. Great. The next item on the agenda is, no,
Hold on one second. Do you, I wish we had our attorney here to properly guide us on this one. Whether or not we need a motion to make the recommendation to council, to take up those things.
We can make it.
Well, yeah, how about we just,
hurt.
yeah.
So I'll make a motion to recommend to council to update the municipal ordinance regarding parking pads, rain gardens, and decorative paving adjacent to the, or in the right of way.
Yes. Okay.
You sure you don't want to call it bioretention areas?
it's got a ring guard.
So it's all encompassing.
Rain gardens / bioretention area.
Okay,
All right.
second.
So moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Okay, next agenda item is zoning amendment priorities.
All right, so, well, Eric, finishes his typing. All right, so we had a long discussion about this.
Mhm.
At our last meeting, and Eric and Jill and I talked a little bit more. And we said, let's go for some really low hanging fruit. As we mentioned earlier, I mean, we're down a couple of members and a lot of the things that were in that chart. A lot of high priority, high effort things. Right, and I think that, it's gonna take a minute to get, our two new planning commissioners up to speed. We know Bo is still getting used to his role as planning commissioner. We're all very well overdue for probably a planning and zoning refresher period, right? So, we looked at the results of the survey that we did. And keeping in mind that we want to, we still want to move forward and tackle some of these easy tasks, but still, be prepared to tackle the harder topics. We looked at what we looked at that page, and what were some of our higher ranking, low hanging fruits, if you will. And so we are recommending that we tackle the review and update our site standards for blight and nuisances. And I think honestly that little sidebar that will actually help our current code enforcement officer and whoever our new code enforcement officer is, they as they're going about the city doing their tasks. Update the definitions within the zoning ordinance. Are there things that should be there that are not? Are there things that we can just get rid of? And then updating the site standards for both waste and rubbish, which again, that will also help our code enforcement. But we do want to get your thoughts on what do you think about some of these low hanging fruits, and we'll dive back into it. I mean, Bo's recommendations to make a more robust chart that we can really dive through things. I think it's a great idea, and I don't think that having this simplistic chart today is really trying to say anything to the contrary, but I think we as a body will be better served if we have all 7 people.
Yeah, but we gotta start somewhere, right?
Right.
That's like kind of what you're getting at. So I think that the idea is to like pick 2 or 3 things that planning commission feels like we can handle low hanging fruit, so it's relatively low effort and non-controversial. So that when we have a fully impaneled body, then we can deal with some of the tougher issues.
Yeah.
And have the wisdom of 2 additional people to help us figure that out.
And I like the definitions. At first I was like, why are we doing definitions? There's so many other ones we could focus on. But if we're having 2 new members, to your point, it makes a lot of sense to kind of review, kind of get those definitions, at least comprehensively over the whole thing.
The definitions already exist, like there's a section on definitions.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why not just look through them and make some suggestions about how do we modernize? them?
And if I was a new, planning commissioner, I would actually feel like, oh, I got to walk into the pool as opposed to just dumping the deep end. I got to actually see, and it made sense, et cetera. I'm getting my feet wet.
Well, then I feel like that, the way you just stated that is a suggestion that we wait until we have 2 additional planning commissioners before we start dealing with that stuff.
Yeah, and nice thing is because we have 3 of them, we can actually go and say definitions, the 3rd one out of those
Make that
2,
later, yeah, okay.
and see if we can get.
Like a year ago? Or maybe I might compact time like this, maybe it's a few years ago.
I don't recall doing.
Maybe it was before your time.
Other than like, cannabis and like,
Yeah.
those kinds of definitions, but
I'm just probably compacting time.
possibly.
We haven't done it since COVID started, because that's when I started, and I know that for sure.
Okay, there's a milestone.
Well, I feel like if there were a previous planning commission has already reviewed and updated the definitions, then our work should be pretty quick.
Pretty good.
And then it's not a lot of effort spent on our part. So I think that's okay, and maybe we delay that to like the last of the
Mhm.
3 items that we're
Mhm.
agreeing to prioritize. Well, the first recommendation is to do the review and update of site standards for blatant nuisances. So like, and you're saying that is based on surveys that we've done and feedback from residents, that's an area of concern, or is it based on our feedback as a
That's
planning
based on
commission?
your feedback from the survey that we did before the last one. But in talking to our code enforcement officer, I mean, this is something that, at least, yeah, I mean, granted, she's new and she's still learning the ordinances, but this is an area that she has found to be deficient, and she's going out and trying to address the visual blight. I mean, it is what it is, right? So, I definitely think that is something that we can and should beef up. I mean, saying, blight should meet the character of the neighborhood. Okay, but
It's
what
pretty
if the
vague.
character of my neighborhood is a garbage dump, right? I mean, like, that's not standard we want anyone to adhere to, so I think
Got it.
that would be a,
So the feedback from code enforcement officers that for blatant nuisance standards, it's just too generic.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for them to be able to enforce as a result.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
Um,
technically it's tied to waste and rubbish, because
Sure.
I'm assuming that waste and rubbish is also considered, could be blight if it's all over your yard or
Yeah.
what have you.
yeah, I mean, there's a separate ordinance that says how you're supposed to deal with waste and rubbish.
Right.
But if you don't do that appropriately, sure. that
Then
can
you're,
be
then you're right in the blight.
nuisance. So it makes sense to do those two things together. Are there any standards that are in the table that people feel like we should prioritize over either blatant nuisances or waste and rubbish?
Well, these are our survey results, aren't they?
Yes, these are our survey results. We don't know, they're anonymized, but it's the ratings that
No, 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 no,
Yeah.
they're ours, so.
they are ours.
like that one.
And that from all 7 planning commissioners who were on the planning commission at the time that the,
I think you said it best earlier. We need to start somewhere. They picked 3 that are relatively simple. 2 of them are tied together.
Yeah.
By the time you get to the third one, maybe the other people will be on board. I'd stick with what we got for now.
Same here.
What was the third one?
The third one
the
was
third one is the definitions.
the
Oh,
definition.
okay, that's what I thought. I just
Yep.
didn't see it highlighted as, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
the
what I
geek in
was-
me wants to know how you guys determine the mode, because some of these are bimodal, but yet you assign a mode value.
That wasn't my cast.
Like the 4th one down and the, don't be sorted by mode. There's 3 3s and 3 4s, so you assigned it a mode of 4. I'm just curious.
4 is bigger.
Right, right. That's-
Round it up.
Yeah.
Round up,
The
there you
problem
go.
Small sample, you get.
I know.
Bimodal
Well,
results.
the 5 sort of.
Right,
It's
pushes
four,
it to the other, right. But now you're getting into an average.
Yeah.
You're getting into my geek zone.
Susie, we picked our 3, we're all set.
Thanks, bud. Yeah, good. I think the discussion is good on the zoning amendment priorities. You have our direction and let's get to work on that next meeting.
Perfect.
So we'll close that item. Next item on the agenda is other matters for discussion. Anything that wasn't already on the agenda that somebody wants to bring up?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Since I have been on the planning commission, we have gone through a number of projects.
Okay.
Is there a way that we can, even though it's not our responsibility, it's nice to know what happened sometimes? So Is there something that shows the status of the things that we've approved so that we at least know?
This business still in
Yeah, you know,
operation?
this-
Did they
it's-
do everything?
It's,
they
you know,
wanted?
like when I'm gonna pick on them, my favorite people. You know, Sarno shows up and said they want to redo the facade.
Yeah.
So they do it and we can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, but because I was here when they said
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But I wasn't here when they said they were gonna do a gas station. Okay, I wasn't here. I wasn't here when they said they were gonna do the apartments over there. So you never really know where the status of the projects stand after they leave after we say we approve the site. I've used Panera, for example. Once Panera's PUD is agreed to, we don't know until we see Panera's grand opening.
Right.
And that was
Is-
that,
It'd be nice to know how somebody,
Especially with 2 new planning commissioners coming on
Right.
board, it'll be.
is there a way to, I don't want to call it like a project list or status list. I don't know. I don't know if there's always something existing. I'm kind of asking, is there a project or status list that is maintained? So it's easy to say, these are the things that we've approved. Or last week, we went over these things and this is where we stand with Discount Tire is, you can see stuff,
Right.
but it's only when you see it. You know, what happened to, I'm sorry, I can't think, what happened to the MRI?
Right.
I'm just using examples of stuff I remember from us approving.
Yeah, we tend to get updates when so there's an event that happens, right?
Right.
Is there a way to know?
Or
what-
a change or need to reapprove the site plan to extend its approval or things like that.
So I mean, the short answer is, no, not really, I mean, we pat ourselves on the back with the annual report and we, kind of review. But there's not something that says the last 5 years in a review, or this is where we're at today.
I feel like it would be beneficial, especially I'm thinking about with two new planning commissioners coming on and 3, maybe 4 major projects. I'm thinking about the Panera PUD project, the gas station, the MRI.
I'm just picking.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be hard to do, just keep like a running spreadsheet of something of all the projects.
It just hit me when I got on the commission, we were talking about a project and it came up about, well, I wasn't in favor of the gas station, but
Right.
but I was going, but it's already there. But it really wasn't there. It was like continually going. And then sometimes it's easy to know where status is just to sit here and look at you. Because you look
Oh, yeah,
like,
you
oh
gotta
my
tell.
God, they're not doing this. Oh my God.
I know, I've been trying so hard.
But it would be interesting if we had, I don't want to call it a report. It's just kind of a spreadsheet that says, these are the things we've looked at. And we already know what we approved for site plans and this is where they stand. Because we just don't know. I mean, I'm not.
Or
saying we
even if
have to
they're,
know.
even if they're complete, in progress, complete,
Yeah.
because that way you're, you can have a million statuses and, oh yeah, this is actually 70%. Nothing complex.
No.
Just
simple.
knowing that there's complete, so that way it can be referenced or.
Should this report be for site plans that the planning commission has approved exclusively?
That's why I started with what we've reviewed and approved. I wasn't trying to get anything we hadn't done.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like site
So-
plan.
I like site plans.
So we use, like, if we have approved the site plan, it should go on this report, stays there until it's complete.
Well, and hey, how about putting it in the annual report?
And
Right,
it can add to the annual.
So
report.
it's a document that can serve a couple things. It's an ongoing record. Citizens can look at and say, oh yeah, we've had 6 projects. Now things are moving forward.
And it doesn't need to be
Just
for
add
both.
it as like, how far do you want to go?
I was gonna suggest 2 years.
Sure.
I think we can go back pretty easily and look through the agendas for planning
Mhm.
commission meetings for the last 2 years and figure out
Mhm.
which ones site plans,
Approved.
which ones had site plan review
Mhm.
and
Hopefully
add those to the list.
not.
Hopefully a bunch of them are complete already.
I might even say, I feel like 3 years.
You think
That's
3
good.
years?
Yeah, because I'm thinking,
Well, the site plans are good for 2 years, so that gives you an extra year.
What, for 1 year?
a
Oh.
site plan. It's
I know they have to
only
s-
good for a year unless you complete that in that year, right? If you get approval on your site plan today and
Okay.
you don't
No, I think-
start on your site plan to move forward with like implementing your site plan.
No, because
Within a year,
aren't there
5 years.
different, because like the apartments, we had to renew their site plan because they hadn't
'Cause they
started.
Because they hadn't done anything with it, so they. had to
Right,
come
but once
back
they
and
start, don't they
once
have
they
2
use,
years
like-
to finish or no, or is it 1 year?
They don't have, you have to make continuous.
Progress.
improvement, Continuous progress. But the site plan itself expires if you don't do anything, like, so if you, like I said, get site plan approval today on the 20th. And by next year, September 20th, you haven't done anything, well, then I guess September 21st, when you want to start putting a shovel on the ground, you're gonna have to come back.
Right.
And get site plan
Right,
approval.
which is what we do with the apartments.
But I'm just thinking 3 years, because, we do have to remember that COVID was in there, and that did kind of throw a monkey wrench.
I would say, since you're putting the report together, you pick the time frame.
Like
That's
the way
fair.
you think, sir. All right, we can do that though.
I
I mean, it is something that I should have easily at my fingertips. right?
It's probably
I have a
already-
bunch of stuff in my head, I just need to put it down.
You probably got an Excel spreadsheet already, just don't know it yet.
It's halfway there. Halfway there. Yes, I can get that, we'll get you something.
Yeah, I got 2 minor things.
Sure.
At the last meeting, we just did a motion for the ordinance to, recommend the ordinance to update to council. At the last meeting, we talked about, we realized that there were issues with the noise ordinance when we were talking about
Yeah.
generators.
Yeah.
And that was supposed to be forwarded to council. So just to make it official, how about if I make a motion to recommend to council to update the noise ordinance?
Mhm.
Yes.
Somebody
Do
second.
we have a
Uh,
second?
uh,
Second.
So moved and seconded.
Oh.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
All right, and then the other thing, really minor, but about 6 months ago, at one of our meetings, I talked about for a variance application, that we put something on the application that when they sign the application, it gives the commissioners, the ability to go on the property to review whatever it is. And I just wanted to make sure if that hasn't gotten onto the application, if we get that on the application. And that's all I've got.
That's good.
Still,
Will you email me
Yeah.
that too?
Yeah.
Please?
anything? No. Wes?
No,
I just
no.
want to tell you guys, so I did mention it already, so we did not get the generator public hearing on for this meeting, obviously, so we will, oh, here's the end. So we will be having that public hearing also for the 18th.
18th. So we're doing 2 public hearings on the 18th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
There is, speaking of projects, I did get an application today for a project for a vocational school. And so that will have a special land use component to it. We've not yet begun the review, but we're cautiously optimistic that may also be that next month. So we may end up with 3 public hearings, but I just kind of stay tuned on that. And I do hope that we will have 2 new planning commissioners appointed by for our next meeting. I'm hoping that'll happen at our council meeting next week.
Is that on the agenda for next week's council meeting?
Should be.
If the agenda was created yet, yes.
Okay.
Right, you're getting ahead of us. But that's my plan.
I think that's probably covers the general communication agenda item too, I'm
Oh,
guessing.
yeah, right. Jump ahead, sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, anything else relative to general communication?
Oh, I guess I should tell you all DDA stuff. I got it. So we have a corridor cleanup this Saturday from 9 to 11. We are going to be meeting out at the pavilion. Bring yourself and I don't know, a friend or 2, gloves. You might want to wear rubber boots. We'll have the bags, the grabbers, and we're going to be focusing on the ditches along Southfield Road. We'll probably focus our efforts more towards the south end of town, since we're focused on the north side of things.
Where's everyone meeting?
We're gonna meet back here at the pavilion.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, we
it's
did that.
also-
We did north of the freeway last time,
Yeah.
right? So we're gonna do
Yeah.
south of the freeway
South
this time.
freeway.
Yeah, I will not make it this time. Sorry.
I also can't make it. I won't be in town.
Oh, that's the rest of you.
I have a breakfast. I'll be,
You have a breakfast?
I'll be, and I know who I'm having breakfast with. So
Okay,
it's
take a
like a
while.
breakfast lunch.
Yeah.
Crunchiness, right? So we will be having that corridor cleanup. So now I guess your homework then is to at least inform your friends and neighbors. They need to show up in your stead.
Gotcha.
So we will be doing that. It's also downtown day. So please go spend some dollars in our downtown district. We will also, the DDA is also, we also have a whole bunch of events coming up in October. We're gonna be doing a block party on the 21st. We are going to be, which is sidecar-ish. Remember we talked about doing this
Yeah,
last summer, and
yeah.
I think we have a path forward to make this a thing. So I will definitely have more information about this, but it's pretty October. So we're gonna be doing a block party. We are gonna have a trunk or treat. And so if anybody wants to, we have registration links out there for to sign up to pass out candy, decorate your, decorate there. We're also going to be having a second movie night, at the very beginning of November, so keep your fingers crossed it doesn't rain, but we will have heaters and bonfires and stuff. So,
That's exciting.
that is my brief snippet of information, and I'll get
Thanks for the
more as
update.
we get here.
Okay. And the last agenda item is adjournment. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved and seconded, meeting's adjourned.
Boom.
Everybody.